Good morning, and thank you for joining me today. This devotional book is one of my favorites. The Little Black Book, as it's sometimes called, has guided Alcoholics Anonymous participants for nearly 3/4 of a century, and it was given to me by an AA friend. I want to read for us what is today's devotional thought from the Little Black Book. But first, I want to read a few words of Jesus that have been living in me for the last day or two. The first is from Matthew 5. We know this as the Beatitudes, and it's just two coupled verses. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And then in chapter 14 of Luke, Jesus said, "Who among you, when deciding to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost to decide if it can be finished? Or what king is there who would set out to wage war, will not first seek counsel to calculate the cost, to determine if he might prevail?" And from the Little Black Book, every strong and beautiful flower must have a strong root in the ground. It must send a root down so that it may be rooted and grounded, while at the same time it sends a shoot up to be the flower that gladdens the world. Both growths are necessary. Without a strong root, it would soon wither. The higher the growth upward, the deeper must be the rooting. My life cannot flower into fullness and helpfulness unless it is rooted in a strong hope, unless it feels deeply secure in goodness and faith. I served a congregation during my seminary years, and that congregation at one time was petitioned by Alcoholics Anonymous to be allowed to use our space for a newly forming AA meeting. There was strong sentiment against it. The church had never opened its building to outsiders before. It seemed irregular, and it could be complicating. Someone would have to be at the church building every Saturday night to open the doors to let the folks in, and then be there once their meeting was over to lock up again. Someone would need to air out the room, to police up the cigarette butts, to put all the chairs in place before Sunday morning Sunday school. Of course, we would charge them for rental of our space, but who would collect the fee? And what if they didn't want to pay? And what if they treated our facility with disrespect? Well, because there is history of alcoholism on both sides of my family, I may have persisted in advocating on behalf of AA. So, in the end, guess who got to be the interface person between our church and the newly forming AA meeting? Actually, it became something of a happy task for me to take on this new discipline. And of course, everything worked out really fine. So much so that one Saturday night, an incredible thing happened. By vote of the group, I was invited to sit in on one of their meetings. And it was in that meeting that I witnessed a moment that has stayed with me now for over 50 years. At one point in the meeting, a participant began to explain why she was an uncommitted AA member and why for her sobriety was a sometime thing. She explained that she had a very demanding job, and she had very needy parents, and she had a lot of friends who simply wouldn't give her space. She didn't have time to be a supportive AA member. She didn't have time to look to the needs of others or to look to her own deeper needs. She finished. And after a respectful silence, a raw-boned older man with burning eyes spoke to her and to the group. He said this: "When I was still drinking, I used to whine like that too. And I had the same problem then that you have now. I had not yet achieved low self-esteem. When your life is full of yourself, there will never be time for the important things." Well, so Memorial Day weekend is here. A time established to allow a grateful nation to mourn and to remember those who have died while serving in our military. How will you spend the weekend? When I was a boy, growing up in East Tennessee, Memorial Day was known as Decoration Day, because on that day, flowers would be placed at the graves of deceased soldiers. Our extended family would gather at the cemetery, and after placing flowers at headstones, we would put tablecloths down on the grass and there enjoy a quiet picnic lunch in the company of the honored dead. There were no speeches, no games to play, there were no brass bands. But to me, that quiet picnic felt like what it felt like on Lord's Supper Sundays over in the church house. We were meek. We were meeked like a wild horse's meeked is mastered and made responsive to a task at hand. On Decoration Day, we were meek and rooted and kind of grounded to the earth, just like those we had come to mourn and honor were grounded. On Decoration Day, even a little boy could know that it was a time to slow the pace, to stop and to count the cost, the sometimes high cost of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. On Decoration Day, I'd say our family achieved low self-esteem. Now, perhaps it's just me, but these days, does Memorial Day seem mostly about having a day off in order to buy a mattress on sale? Or maybe a new car? I confess to you, it troubles me some. My dad survived the Second World War, And in fact, on the very day that I was born, 23-year-old Sergeant Weaver was in Eigelshoven, Holland, on the German border. Dad rarely talked about his time in the war, but there was one incident so impactful to him that he could not keep it in. He said, after a particularly difficult time liberating a French town, he was ordered to take a platoon to secure a neighborhood and then to search the bodies of the dead German soldiers for useful information. He recalled thinking how very young the dead soldiers looked. In actuality, I suspect they were no younger than himself. But while rifling through the personal effects of an anonymous private, he opened a buttoned chest pocket and found a Bible. And inside the Bible, a ragged photo of an older woman, which he took to be the dead soldier's mother. Now think about that, Dad said to me. There I was, kneeling over his dead body, and I too had a Bible in my coat pocket. Mother gave me that Bible before we shipped out. Her picture was in my Bible too. Very likely, this dead German was a Christian, and I was a Christian. And I don't know, but I may have been the one who killed him. So today, mine is a very simple devotional thought. This Memorial Day weekend, before we buy a mattress, before we grill up a picnic, before we take in a brass band or pause to listen to the patriotic pontification of some politician, could you and I find the time to pause, to mourn, to pause to count the cost of war? Could we manage somehow to find the time, if only briefly, to be meek enough, to be reined in enough, to achieve low self-esteem regarding the profound number of deaths of soldiers everywhere? General Eisenhower once said, "War is humankind's most tragic folly. To seek it or to advise its provocation is a dark crime." This holiday weekend, as you and I receive the national calling to memorialize fallen warriors, let's try to do it more mindfully, in the context of a quiet and unhurried conversation with God. Can we do that? Can we agree that as an intentional devotional act, sometime across this long weekend, that you and I will make ourselves available to God? Prayerfully, with mourning and meekness, to root ourselves, to ground ourselves like hopeful flowers in the mercy and the love of God, and in the fervent, prayerful hope for a world without war? Let's try to do that this weekend. Bless your hearts today.